tutorial about paper mache. Okay, first of all, what is it? Kind of a brief history is some of the earliest examples were found in China in 202 BCE through 220 CE. That was the Han Dynasty in China. And what they found was a lot of things, including armor and everyday objects, were made out of paper. So paper mache. So to do that, they layered the paper on in like multiple layers and used thick lacquer or just a really thick glue to hold them together so that it could protect against blades or other warriors. And then the everyday objects was almost anything that you could think of, from like small containers that could hold water or little jewelry boxes that could get highly decorative. And so this tradition grew throughout Asia as it expanded out of China into Japan and some areas in Southeast Asia. And then it started to move over towards Europe through trade routes. So in about the 10th century, we found it in France. It became very popular, and that's where we get the word paper mache. That is a French word meaning chewed paper or paper pulp. So I have an example of an artist, Shi Hirata, working out of Brazil, who uses paper pulp. So just kind of a mixed up mush of paper and glue and water so that you can shape it and sculpt it into anything that you want. This artist made like these beautiful little figurines of a doll that's coming out of itself. But something closer to what we would know is probably paper mache strips, using strips of paper to cover a sculptural form. An example of this would be a well-known artist here in America of Dr. Seuss. He did a series called Unorthodox Taxidermy, where he used his style of designing imaginary animals and put them on wall mounts as if a trophy hunter had found them in the wild and killed them and then had them made into taxidermy to be hung up on the walls. So I have a bit of a lesson idea of how to use paper mache to do a project similar to this. But first, here's kind of a quick how-to. I have the materials and the recipe for the paper mache paste here. So the first three materials you're going to need are water, flour, and glue. Those are the only things in paper mache paste. And the recipe is 1 part equal parts for the mixture. So if you do 1 cup of water, you're going to do 1 cup of flour and 1 cup of glue. And you can scale this all the way up to gallons. You just put the same amount of each thing in to make the paste. And then the rest of the materials are things that you're probably going to need in order to make things out of paper mache, to use the paste. So a piece of sketch paper and a pencil, scissors to maybe cut out the cardboard, and then tape and paper. Traditionally, newsprint is best because it's pretty thin and absorbs the paper mache paste pretty well. But I've also used toilet paper, and it's worked pretty well. Or so just any sort of absorbent paper. Printer paper is actually not very absorbent, so I would not recommend using a traditional printer paper. But I have a quick video about the paste and shows a bit of the technique of how to use the paste and how to dip the strips. So, all right, so I had made this paste a day ago and I just brought it out of the fridge. So I am mixing up some of the flour that had settled to the bottom of the paste. And now I'm picking it up to kind of show that it should be a pretty thick consistency. Like it should kind of look like a heavy cream, basically. And so now I'm taking some strips and I'm showing how to dip it into the paste, making sure that it's covering both sides of the paper. And then I like to use 2 fingers to remove the extra paste because this is very gentle and it won't really pull apart the paper. Yep, and then here I'm just smoothing it onto a surface and it sticks right away. So another neat thing about paper mache is it sticks really well to things like cardboard and other paper, but it sticks really well to other pieces of paper mache. So if you're building something that has like an overhanging edge, or you're just trying to get something very smooth, it's a lot easier to stick paper mache to itself. And yeah, I'll get more into the why later. But so here's some of the steps for a potential lesson to use with paper mache, the unorthodox taxidermy or imaginary animal taxidermy wall mounts. So on the teacher side of things, a good idea to prep all of the paper mache paste ahead of time. Like I said, it can be stored in the fridge, and yeah, and then it's also good to gather and organize the materials so that students can collect what they need. So it's a lot easier if a student can get what they need, move to their area, and then start using the paper mache, because their hands are going to be really goopy. So it's a good idea for them to be able to grab everything that they need and hang out at their stations. So for students during class time, to start out with the lesson, it would be good to get a good sketch out, something that is a front and a side view so that you have a roadmap for where you're going. I have a little example of the frog head that I decided to do. And next step is to build out the form that you're going to paper mache on top of. So you first cut out the wall mount shape, and then you tape wads of paper onto the wall mount in about the shape of the head. Because if you think about paper, it's just thin layers up on top of each other. And that's going to take a while to build up so it's thick enough to be the shape of a head. So it's a lot easier and a lot faster if you try to get it into about the shape that you want before you start adding on those layers of paper mache. And once students are ready to start paper macheing, they can go to town. And it's a good idea to try to get at least 2 layers of paper mache on, so that it's strong enough, and it's strong enough. And 3 layers is preferable, but time usually works out so that 2 is all that can get done. Then after everything is dry, because you have to account for the dry time, after it's all dry, you can paint. Okay, so I have an example of the steps. I have some pictures of me going through the steps. I started out with my wall mount, and I kind of shared some pictures of some ideas that I was thinking about, some shapes of wall mounts that I was thinking about. And then I have a picture to the right of the paper wads that are all taped together underneath. Before any paper mache gets brought out, this is the form that I made to kind of look like the shape of the head of the frog. Okay. So on the left is my first layer of paper mache. And that took a while, but I kind of realized that I didn't like the nose. So in between the layers, I added an extra nose with toilet paper, which was super helpful because the paper stuck really well to the wet paper mache. And then I waited for it to dry, and I did another layer on top of that. After that dried, a quick layer of white to seal some things, and then I painted my frog green. Yeah, and then I have a lovely picture of myself after my creature had come to life and been fully realized. So some classroom recommendations. This can be used very sustainably. You can reuse paper, potentially from other classrooms or past projects, or cardboard, maybe even from the lunchroom or the kitchen of the school. And I also have some notes about some sensory needs. Some kids really don't like the feeling of the paper mache paste, so gloves are a helpful option. And making sure that the paste or the water is not too warm or too cold. Room temperature seems to be the easiest accommodation, because if it's too cold, it's hard to work with, and if it's too warm, it can kind of feel gross. And some notes on storing. Make sure to refrigerate it if you are using flour, because it will go bad otherwise. Or you could just not use flour. Like I said, the flour helps it stick to itself, but it gives the paper a little bit more texture. But if you're worried about it going bad over time, you could just not do the flour and maybe add some extra glue. And a note about disposing it: never throw it away in the sink. The glue in the flour will clog your drains, so always throw it away in a trash can. All right, here are some of my resources that I used. Down at the bottom, there's some extra ideas for lesson examples and how to scale it up for older students. But yeah, I hope that this was helpful, and good luck paper macheing.